The story began with two slaves fighting in a slave betting arena until one of them emerged victorious. The winner, number 17, assured her opponent, number 8, that she would always watch over her, despite their forced inter-slave battles. Later, the slave master battered slave 17 because she didn't beat the other slave to death. But the girls could not defend themselves due to their slave collars, which could end their lives for harboring ill intent towards their master. Suddenly, the palace was raided, and a young man commanded his aides to capture the slave master and his cohorts. The slave master dragged both girls to protect him, but number 8 was snatched by some of the raiders, leaving 17 with him. Before the slave master could escape, one of the raiders sent arrows straight to his body, but he used 17's body as a shield. The poor girl fell lifelessly to the ground, and number 8 got really mad and rushed to attack the slave master. At the same time, the young man, Celeste, had just arrived at the scene. Celeste was a dragonkin, nearly 300 years old, who hadn't found his soulmate until he saw slave number 8. That very girl had just thrown her dagger at the slave master, so the slave collar activated and choked her as Zaddy would. Celeste tried to save her, but she'd already been suffocated to death. Yet in his desperation, he held hope and began chanting a healing spell upon her. At the same time, her slave master reached towards her, but Celeste pierced him with icicles. As for the girl, Celeste and his friend, Will, found out that the slave collar had gone too deep in her neck. So Will took over casting the healing spell while Celeste breathed into her and kissed her, begging her not to die. In no time, number 8 was breathing again, and Celeste held her in his arms, weeping deeply. However, she was worried about her friend, 17, and Will confirmed that 17 was also breathing, but number 8 collapsed again due to relief. Afterwards, Will asked Celeste what had suddenly gotten into him, and the dragonkin announced that number 8 was his fated mate. When she woke up, she was relieved to see her friend beside her, but she realized that she'd been reincarnated with memories of her past life, where she died due to an ailment. Both girls hugged each other tight, but when they heard a knock on the door, number 8 immediately got defensive. However, it was just Celeste who'd walked in with a meal for her, and she recognized his voice when he spoke. She collapsed in fear, but he promised that he wasn't her enemy and that he wouldn't hit her. He then served a buffet for both girls and fed 8 while introducing himself as a guard working in the 2nd security unit in their city. Since both girls had been rescued from the gambling den, Celeste had them in protective custody, so they were free from slavery, and no one would ever hit them again. Celeste added that although they were under the protection of security forces, they would be placed in an orphanage located within the human protection zone. Then he stated that number 8, however, was his destined partner, and like other dragonkin, he treasured his mate more than anything, even more than himself. Since it was customary for mates to live together, he said he would have to take Celeste in, but if she didn't want to live with him, he wouldn't force her. Seeing his expression was downcast, she held his face and asked if he was okay, but he smiled and thanked her. He said 17 was likely to be placed in an orphanage or with foster parents, but if they didn't want to be separated, they could head to the orphanage together. Since it was a protection period, he asked them to consider their options and what they would like to do. When he left, 8 said Celeste wasn't a scary person and obviously not an enemy, while 17 said she was fine if 8 found Celeste to be trustworthy. She also said that her mother told her before they became slaves that a mate was chosen by God as someone who'd bring happiness in marriage. She advised number 8 to go to Celeste's place, but the girl refused, so 17 came up with an idea. Later, Will challenged Celeste, asking if it was true that he refused to take in his soulmate, but Celeste said he was only putting it on hold as he couldn't force her to live with him. Will asked if Celeste was okay with that, but Celeste confessed that just thinking about being separated from number 1 made his heart feel like it was going to shatter, and not having her by his side was already hurtful. In the end, what mattered to him was to fulfill the wishes of his mate, and if she wished for him to stay away, then he would have no choice but to obey. Later, Will walked into the girl's room and introduced himself as Celeste's friend, but his aura was rather cold and scary, and he admitted that he didn't really like number 8 because she had turned his guy into a sucker for women 4 inches and below. At first, he thought it was good that Celeste's mate had been found, but after seeing his own friend suffer like that, he only wanted to know how number 8 genuinely felt about Celeste. She said Celeste was a good person, and Will confirmed that Celeste was a really great guy, adding that being the mate of a dragonkin was something to be envied, as dragons would do anything they could for their mates. And yet here was number 8, hesitating to be taken in by Celeste. Incoherently, number 8 said she wondered if being taken in by Celeste meant she was using the dragonkin simply because she was his mate. Will understood that she felt it was wrong to have Celeste help her merely because she was his mate, and he burst out laughing, saying that was a silly reason, as number 8 had the liberty to use Celeste as much as she wanted. He explained that for dragons, making their mates happy was their greatest joy because they ultimately wanted to please their partners. For Celeste, getting to be with his mate and number 8 getting a place to live was just the perfect scenario, but the girls wondered how he could claim to be Celeste's friend and still suggest that they should use his friend. He admitted that he indeed was a friend, and that's why he didn't want to see his guy suffer, so he was a little pissed that number 8 would be taking his best friend. Surprisingly, Celeste walked right into the room and 8 pondered upon Will's words, especially when he said that the greatest joy of their kind was to be with their mate. She got an approving nod from number 17 and tugged at his shirt, muttering that she wanted to be together with him. Warmly, he smiled so brightly it could light a whole room, and both girls asked Celeste to give them a name. He then named number 8 as Yuri and number 17 as Daisy. Silly Will burst out laughing because the names sounded so basic, but the girls were excited about their new names, and Yuri thanked Celeste for helping out. Soon, they were joined by a lady named Valentine, who worked in the second squad just like Celeste, and she informed Daisy that she would be her guardian. Daisy politely welcomed her care, explaining that she had requested that someone from the same place as Celeste could take her in as a guardian so she could see Yuri easily. Valentine also said that if they followed them to work, they could meet each other every day, as it was permitted for dragonkin to bring their mates to work. Celeste reassured Yuri that he would do his best to make her very comfortable, and after getting the criminally offensive side-eye from Will, Yuri decided that she would also put in her best to avoid wasting the efforts of those kind men. Later on, both girls were dressed nicely, and it was time for Yuri to bid her friend goodbye for the day. The girls hugged, and Daisy left with her guardian, while Celeste held Yuri's hand in his as they walked through the town. People around gossiped, wondering whether they were siblings, not knowing that Celeste was her pappy. Soon, he noticed that their carriage was already waiting, so he quickly sought her consent, grabbed her in his arms, and flew down the staircase to make it in time to their carriage. She was cooped up in his arms and blushing through all of it while seated firmly on him. Some ran in the carriage, handed Yuri an apple, and Yuri was amazed at how big the apple was, and Celeste explained that it was a beautiful palm. This reminded her of some vague memory in her head, which made her wonder who it was that used to cut apples for her in her past life. After a while, they arrived at Celeste's home, and he was greeted by the maids, whom he introduced to Yuri. A middle-aged woman introduced herself as Celine and her daughter as Adelaide, both of whom said they looked forward to serving her, with Adelaide personally assisting Yuri. However, the aura around Adelaide felt really cold and dark, and Yuri couldn't figure out her intent. Just then, Celine noticed that Yuri's hair was all a big mess, so she asked to be granted permission to tidy up her hair a bit. She started working on the hair and asked Celeste to get some scented oil for Yuri, and then she said that there were some temporary clothes for Yuri, but she could pick out the designs she liked. Soon, Yuri was tidied up, and Celeste said she looked super cute. It was time for the maids to prepare dinner, and Celeste ordered them to slice the apple from earlier as well, but as always, Adelaide looked sus. Later, dinner was served, and Celeste kept digging into some meat, claiming dragons loved meat. He served some to Yuri, who said it was delicious, and then shared that Celine must have inherited her mother's cooking skills because her mom was a wonderful cook. He also said that she had been working for 10 years thus far, and Yuri said that was quite a long time. Celeste said he couldn't relate because dragons lived between 1,500 years and 2,000 years, elves lived between 1,000 and 1,500 years, dwarves lived about 500 years, while beastkin lived about 250 years. Yuri then asked what the lifespan was for humans, and Celeste was very silent. Deep down, Yuri already knew that a human's lifespan, even at the longest, was at most 100 years. Before she became a slave, her life was destined to end much sooner than that. And unfortunately, once again, she would have to die before the people who cared about her. Celeste, on the other hand, thought about a conversation he had with Valentine, who had recently decided to be a foster parent. She shared that living alone had gotten a little boring, so spending 100 years raising someone else wouldn't be so bad. Besides, he was getting old and might as well train some successors and raise others to be useful in society. Celeste had told Valentine that he wasn't that old, but Val said that for an elf, 700 years was basically the age of a granny. Not to mention that whoever she raised would pass away before her due to the fleeting nature of humans. Seeing Val's noble resolve to raise someone still, Celeste told him that he would make for a wonderful guardian. This took Celeste down memory lane, recalling a beastman with whom he had been friends for a long time, until the guy was finally a grandpa. Eventually, Celeste had to bury his friend and was left all alone. As he wiped food particles from the side of Yuri's mouth, he accepted that she might live only 100 years, and yet he was willing to still have her beside him. The next day, Celeste woke Yuri up and used magic to light up the lanterns in the house. They had breakfast and helped to sear her meat, making it more palatable for her. He told her he would be on duty, and while he was at work, she would spend time at the security unit station. He also informed her that Daisy would be coming, and so they could be together. Celeste heard a knock on the door and went to answer it, but right as he turned, Yuri felt something choking her and saw flashes of the slave collar that had almost ended her life that day. Her spoon dropped and she had a panic attack, trying to explain that something was happening to her neck. Celeste calmed her down, explaining that what she had heard was just the visitor announcement buzzer, and then he calmed her down for a while. While the buzzing continued, he told her to hold on and then instructed the maids to handle everything. Later, he told Yuri that he had changed the sound of the buzzer so that particular sound would no longer be heard, and the senior maid apologized for everything. Yuri still cowered in fear and apologized, but Celeste promised her that no one in that house would hit her. In his arms, Yuri felt safe because his big hands covered her whole back, and his embrace felt really warm. But while he was holding Yuri in his arms, Yuri's assistant Adelaide stared at her with so much darkness from the abyss. Anyway, Celeste said he would leave the house in her care, and then, when Yuri could stand, they got up and left for work. At the guard station, Yuri and Daisy reunited, all but looking cute. Celeste said that while he was working, Valentine would be teaching the girls how to read and write, and so they were eager, saying they would do their very best. Before he left, Celeste placed his hands around Yuri, telling her he would see her at lunch. He also told Val he was counting on her, and if anything happened, she could call him right away. When Celeste left, Val explained that dragonkins extremely hated being separated from their mate. But Celeste was even a rational dragon who wouldn't leave because normal dragons wouldn't leave their mates, as they were so possessive that they would keep their mates on their laps and never let them go. Later, Val showed the girls around and even took them to the courtyard training ground, where various demi-humans were being trained. The training master, Charles, was busy at work, and Valentine introduced him to Yuri and Daisy. Of course, the creepy dude was excited because he had a thing for their type. He introduced himself and noticed that both girls were withdrawn from him because his face was so hideous that it could trigger the apocalypse. Eventually, Daisy loosened up and introduced herself, and everything was good. He asked the girls if it was their first time meeting a demon race, and when Yuri seemed confused, he explained that just as the human race had different species, like dragonkin, elves, and dwarves, the demon race also had various species, and he was particularly from the species called lizardmen. Instantly, Yuri was attracted to his pretty dragon skills, and she complimented them, but the dude was so excited that he flipped his wand on the ground. He then explained that one mustn't praise the skills of a male lizardman, because in their race, complimenting their skills was the same as saying that she wanted to marry him. Yuri apologized, but Charles told her that actually the beauty of one's skills was something lizardmen took pride in. She turned and asked Val whether touching the guy's fat tail was allowed, and Val laughed, saying it wasn't allowed either, as only a lizardman's wife was allowed to touch his big black tail. If Yuri did anything like that, Celeste would be driven mad with jealousy, so Charles told her that even though his tail was off limits, she was permitted to touch his arm. She told him he looked like a dragonkin, and he explained that both lizardmen and dragonkin inherited strong dragon traits because lizardmen had slit pupils, and that was one of the distinguishing traits that granted them good night vision. However, Celeste pointed out that for some reason in Celeste's house, he had nightlights and the rooms and hallways were all properly lit. However, Charles told her that all those lights were probably there for her own sake, because dragonkin and lizardmen could see well even at night, unlike humans. The girl felt so loved, realizing that everything Celeste had been doing was to make her comfortable. Anyway, she thanked Charles for everything, and he thanked her for not being afraid of him. She looked up to Val, saying that Charles was not a scary guy and was rather kind, and she affirmed her words. For some reason, Daisy decided that whatever training the macho men were doing was what she wanted to do. She then said she didn't want to keep relying on Valentine's help all the time, and if she was strong enough to fight alongside everyone, she might be able to work there. Val told her not to worry about all that and insisted, but Daisy insisted on trying. At the same time, Yuri also said she wanted to participate and she picked up a sword. This was because back then, fighting was part of their job as slaves, so if they could do that, it meant they could also help Celeste. Seeing that she was persistent, Charles let Yuri do as she wished, and out of the blue, Will jumped, saying he would be her opponent as long as she didn't mind. As they sparred against each other, Will was impressed by Yuri's speed and agility because the wooden sword in her hand was pretty heavy. Yet the number of strikes she delivered was incredible, meaning she would be troublesome to deal with if she were a dual sword wielder. On the other hand, Yuri acknowledged that Will was much stronger than she was, and even if she went all out, she could certainly never be his match. Thus far, he hadn't even counterattacked for a second, and had been deflecting her strikes from both hands with just one. He hadn't moved a single step, and this made Yuri feel like she wouldn't be employed in any way because Celeste would still have to bear the burden of protecting her. As she remembered her time as a slave, Yuri felt like this wasn't just training, and she had to fight for real. She immediately aimed at his legs, and he reflexively jumped, but was surprised that she even did that because it was a dangerous move that even recruits were not taught in the guard before they were ready. Will remembered that this girl was a combat slave, so he wondered whether the training should continue. He wasn't wrong because at the same time, Yuri remembered the angry howling of the slave master who beat and bashed her up for her performance dropping and claimed that she was doing it on purpose. He reminded her that her worth only lay in the odds and that murder and winning were everything that her existence was centered around. At the same time, another memory flashed in Yuri's head. She remembered her parents discussing her health and instantly wanted to be with them even for a while. She felt sorry at that moment for making them worry and always being sick, so they had to take care of her consistently. Most importantly, she felt sorry that she had been a useless child. With this pain and pent-up emotions in her, Yuri launched herself in the air and almost landed one clean strike on Will's head, but he parried the attack with his sword. Both he and the other guys watching were shocked at how much power was released. Will decided to take her more seriously, but Yuri was pretty quick, even for him, and their height difference made it difficult for him to protect his lower half, which is where Yuri kept hammering on. He was already getting pushed back by her agility and wondered whether to knock her sword away, but he knew that if he accidentally twisted even a single finger on her body, Celeste would beat the life out of him. He instantly told her that she had won the battle, but this girl wasn't listening and continued with her thing. Will remained terrified of wounding Celeste's mate, so he instead decided to flee the scene. But soon he returned with a cup of cold water and splashed it on her head to cool her head. Surprisingly, Celeste came between the two of them and separated them. He instantly grabbed his Yuri away, as he couldn't stand her getting drippy for Will. Will quickly apologized, saying the water wasn't intended to hurt her, and Celeste said he understood because he had seen everything going on in the corridor. Yuri called out to Celeste, asking whether he felt cold, but he said he was fine because dragons could withstand temperature changes, and especially because his magic was water-based, which permitted him to adapt to both heat and cold to an extent. He turned to Will, reminding him that Yuri was just an ordinary human, and her body wasn't as strong as theirs. Obviously, if she got wet in such weather, she might catch a cold. Will apologized, saying he didn't think of that, while Yuri asked if there was anything she could do for Celeste. He smiled, understanding that she wanted to be useful, And then he said that even though certain people her age were working, she didn't have to. Besides, when he adopted her, the state provided him with financial support, so she didn't have to worry about that. Valentine also told her not to worry. Then Celeste told her that despite his appearance, he could earn a good salary and support his partner. He then asked Yuri whether she loved fighting, and if that was the case, she'd find other passions in the near future. She, however, said that she didn't want to get hurt or to hurt others, and Celeste told her that at the right time, she should choose a job she loved. For that, he said, they could start with learning to read and write, because no matter what job she chose, her inability to read and write would be a major obstacle. Afterwards, Valentine called her so he could try her with magic, and thereafter he told her to put on a coat so her body wouldn't get cold. Later, she came to face Will, who said she was so stubborn because, despite his advising her to use Celeste for her advantage, she was still insisting on her own stance. However, he said that his opinion of her had changed a little, and she said the same thing. She explained that she didn't want to get hurt or hurt anyone. She explained that some were hurt and those who fell ill and those who died, all due to that violence. That was when Will understood deeply what it was that was going on in her head, and so he apologized, and she then apologized to him for not causing her any harm. Later, Valentine called her to get some warmth because the wind was getting colder. As she left, Will wondered whether that was how she was or whether it was all because of her seriousness. Valentine explained that it was probably Charles who clung to Yuri's body because she was interested in touching his scales. Charles, on the other hand, had frustrated Daisy in their sparring, so much so that she gave up. Immediately, Yuri sprang up to meet her friend, saying Daisy was the strongest as a slave and the very best, but it seemed Charles was far stronger than Daisy. As she left, Celeste gently pulled her back, asking her if she enjoyed touching Charles's scales. The girl was surprised, and then she asked him if he was angry. He was silent and eventually said he wasn't angry, but he wasn't comfortable with that, and he couldn't explain how he felt because it felt like perceiving someone else's perfume on their partner. Almost in tears, he explained that dragons were jealous creatures, and if they perceived another man's scent on their partner, they would feel intense jealousy and great discomfort. So the bottom line, he was currently feeling jealous, and Yuri could tell that. Anyway, he explained that he knew Yuri was free to make friends with whomever she wanted, but it still hurt him so deeply. Yuri could see how pained Celeste looked, and she started thinking about how he is supposed to be her life partner. And even though she had never experienced love before, she could tell that Celeste was in pain, and it was all because of her, so she apologized from the depths of her heart. However, Celeste told her not to, because she had done nothing wrong, and the fault was all his because he was the one who took her, because she was his destined partner, and because he was the one who tried to force it on her. Just then, the bell rang for the third time, so Celeste had to go back to work. He told Yuri not to worry herself over it, because whatever it was his problem to deal with. Also, he told Valentine to take care of Yuri. Much later, Valentine apologized, saying that if he had been more careful, it wouldn't have happened, because he had underestimated how deeply dragons get attached to their partners. However, Yuri told Valentine that she wasn't at fault for anything. On the other hand, Will wondered whether he was reckless, while Charles felt he had really messed up. They spoke about Yuri's magical energy that was perceived during her sparring fight with Will, because apparently, humans with magic were extremely rare in their world. Later, Daisy asked Yuri whether she was going after Celeste, but Yuri said she wouldn't do so just yet. Celeste, on his own, had a self-talk, reminding himself that Yuri was just a human, and humans couldn't sense their destined partner. Even more pressing was that Yuri was once a slave, so she hadn't fully realized her position as his partner. However, it didn't make it any easier for him to accept and comprehend the thought of another man touching Yuri, because she couldn't even grasp the reason. Yet he felt Yuri was so kind and he wanted her beside him, not leaving even for a moment, so he didn't want anyone else to touch her. Weirdly, he felt he didn't love Yuri as a person, and it was only his instinct kicking in because she was his destined partner. Such traits as jealousy, desire, and such deep longing were all a dragon's instinct, yet he felt he wanted to know Yuri even more and have a deeper understanding of her personality. Still, he feared drawing closer to her because he didn't want her to hate him, but he had faith that Yuri might accept him. even though there was a chance that she might still reject him. Right now, his fear was that he wouldn't handle her rejection well, and his reaction might be quite terrible. He came to the understanding that dragons were truly complicated creatures. Because if he had stayed in front of Yuri any longer, he would have lost control, and he had to withdraw. However, he knew he couldn't run away forever and must face his fears as a dragon who had found a destined partner. On the other hand, Yuri walked up to Valentine, asking her to teach her what it truly meant to be a dragon's destined partner. Val answered, saying that for dragonkins, a soulmate was a special existence. She asked Yuri and Daisy what they knew about soulmates. Yuri said that meant a destined partner chosen by the gods. Daisy seconded that opinion. Val decided to start by explaining the different races. In their world, humans were divided into 5 main races. Although there were demons like Charles in a certain part of the city, most of the city's inhabitants belonged to the human race. These were Dragon Kings, a race with powerful bodies and innate magical abilities who lived longer if they were stronger. They were characterized by slit pupils, fangs, claws, and tall stature, and the younger ones had wilder tempers, so dragons like Celeste were actually quite rare. However, the dragons were such that if they were angered, it would be a big problem. Someone like Celeste was always kind, so he certainly had to be scary when mad. The next category of humans were elves, who were not as physically strong as the Dragon King, but all were born with strong magic. They were known as people of the forest, but had more recently started living in the cities, just like Valentine herself. The third category was dwarves, who, though small in stature, had sturdy builds and were highly skilled craftsmen. The fourth category was beast folk, who were the most diverse and numerous race among humans because they had keen senses and superior physical abilities. And finally, the last species were humans like Yuri and Daisy, who had the greatest differences in individual abilities. Many were born without magic, and if they had it, they could not often use it. In fact, those humans were so small that they were classified as a protected species. Among all the races, the dragons had the strongest instincts, so when they met their soulmate, they would know in an instant, even from a distance. Yuri confessed that because Celeste was her soulmate, she liked him, but she wondered if she would be abandoned if they were no longer soulmates. Valentine explained that that would never happen because a Dragon King only had one soulmate their entire lifetime, and Celeste's soulmate was Yuri. She felt somewhat relieved and felt bad about feeling relieved, but Valentine explained more about it, saying she should think about having just one person in the entire world who filled her heart just by being near them, and someone she could cherish forever. Obviously, if such a person existed for Yuri, she would want to stay with them forever. At this point, Yuri remembered her parents, saying fighting her illness was painful, but seeing her parents' faces made her happy and gave her strength. As she died, she thanked her parents and said she would do her best to live, but in this world, she wanted to be with Celeste for a much longer time. Meanwhile, Valentine explained to her that the feeling for Dragon King was overwhelmingly strong because they never wanted their most beloved person taken from them, which is why they hated it when their soulmate carried someone else's scent. Noting that Lady Valentine knew a lot about Dragon King, Yuri pointed that out, and Val said that she knew Celeste's parents, as they were a Dragon King and an elf made of different races, who were always happy together. However, she explained that being a Dragon King's soulmate meant that one would never struggle to survive, but Yuri said that Will wanted to use Celeste as well. Val said that it wasn't that deep, although that dude had an unhealthy obsession with his male friends, and that was weird and scary to Yuri either way. Lady Valentine explained that afterwards, Lady Valentine asked Yuri whether there was a moment she ever found herself hating being in Celeste's presence, but the girl thought about how she loved having Celeste's hand all over her, as the scent felt gentle. Val said that however she chose to define her relationship with Celeste was entirely up to her, and it wasn't necessarily that they had to become life partners, because some will spend their lives as close friends or even as family. Still, she wanted Yuri to consider Celeste's feelings, even a little. Yuri said she had no intention of hurting Celeste, and Valentine said she wished Celeste could hear such beautiful words. So she came up with the idea of Yuri writing Celeste a letter because he would love it, not to mention that writing was the best way to learn new words. Daisy was excited about writing a letter, so Valentine said she could write one to her, while Yuri thought deeply about what she would write in her letter. The old version of herself used to love reading, even if she wasn't good at speaking, but with a letter, she may have struggled. Valentine started by teaching them the letters of the alphabet, and Yuri seemed to be seeing only weird things. When they asked what was wrong, she remembered that she had seen it in her past life, as that was a hiragana chart. She recognized the 50 sounds, even though the shapes of the letters were different, and when Valentine told them to start writing, she eagerly started. Daisy could already write Valentine's name, and Yuri was said to have an incredible memory. So, with that level of progress, Valentine believed they would have both mastered reading and writing before the end of the day. While this was going on, Yui smiled for the first time ever, and this was shocking for them because it was a rare sight. Valentine says that if Celeste knew about Yui's smile, he would definitely be jealous, and so it was definitely time to write a letter. She told the girls to write whatever they wanted, no matter how many pages, but if there were any mistakes, they would have to start from the beginning. Yui began thinking that to Celeste, all she wanted to say was she was sorry for what happened on that day. After a while, they were done, and the moment Yui saw Celeste, she ran to hug him tight and then presented the letter she had constructed for him. In the letter, she told him she had started learning to write, and she was grateful to him for lighting up the house. She also thanked Charles for what he taught her and thanked Celeste for giving her a chance, for accepting her, and for saving her. And saving her on the verge of death, for letting her stay with Daisy, keeping the room warm, carrying her, walking slowly so she could catch up, protecting her from the cold and listening to her. She thanked him from the bottom of her heart for giving her a name. This letter deeply moved Celeste, and he thanked her, saying he would treasure it forever. He then told Yui that he helped her because they were connected, and that was why he took her in and cared for her, even though his feelings were still unclear. Yuri responded, saying Valentine had already taught her not to let others touch her and be careful about anything. And even if it was difficult, she was going to do everything she could to avoid hurting Celeste for his sake. She also confessed she didn't know whether she loved him, but she was connected to him, and until she fully understood her feelings for him, he should wait for her. Celeste was visibly happy hearing this and said that Yuri certainly was his partner, and since he was a dragon, he had a long life ahead of him, meaning he could wait for years, no matter how long. He also wanted to get to know Yuri better, so he asked her to teach him about him, not just because they were connected, but because he wanted to know and love her as she was. Yuri said she also wanted to know him, and then he pulled her in for a tight hug, assuring her they had plenty of time. Later that day, they had some sweets in class while studying, and even though it wasn't so easy, it was quite fun for them. Daisy said the village she was in before she was enslaved was small, and almost everyone there was human. No one really read or wrote except the village chief, and whether she had stayed as a slave or in that village, she wouldn't ever have learned, so she was pretty happy. Yuri, hearing this, was reminded that in her past life, she had only wished to regain her health so she could study with her friends each week after school and play together. But that wish had never come true, not even once. But right now, here she was studying with Daisy, and it meant so much to her that she was. The next day, Celeste told Yuri that they had to get more clothes for her because she didn't have enough at home. The girl worried about the money, but he told her not to because he only cared that she would find clothes she liked. At the store, he told the lady what he wanted, and she asked if there was a preferred color. So he told her to go ahead and pick out what might suit her, starting from underwear, sleepwear, and clothes to match her outfit. The lady took Yuri's cape, made out of snow spider threads, which had been created for daily use, and was the one that Celeste handed over to her. The snow spider was a spider living in the snow mountains, and clothes made from its threads were comfortable year-round, but quite expensive. Capes made from them were given as gifts when kids came of age with well wishes. While with the lady, Yuri asked whether she would have to take off her clothes, but Celeste told her not to worry because the lady would show her how to put on the clothes. When they were done changing, Celeste stepped out in a dress and asked whether she looked weird because she did feel like she had stepped out for prom in the 12th century. However, Celeste told her that she looked cute, and since she said it wasn't uncomfortable for her, he said they would buy everything that she was currently wearing. He asked if she wanted to try on other clothes, and the beast ladies bombarded Yuri with more suits. She pointed out the types she wanted, and Celeste told her to try them on and get some shoes and accessories to match the outfit. Deep in thought, Celeste realized that it had always seemed strange to him that his dragon dad was always constantly showering his mother with gifts and clothes, but now he understood why, and that it stemmed from a feeling of happiness. Their total was about 10 pieces, so Celeste said they would buy them all, and they should send everything except what she was wearing at the moment to his home. He complimented Yuri, saying she was adorable, and he noticed she gave a very faint smile. He asked her if she was enjoying herself, and she said she was, and then thanked him for his kindness. Back at home, they had small talk, during which Celeste said he was glad he figured out what sort of clothes Yuri liked, while Yuri herself said she wanted to know more about Celeste and his family. He told her he had a mom and dad and twin brothers. Apparently, his parents loved traveling, and after he came of age, they left the city with his brothers. Later on, his brothers became knights in the capital, but no one knew their current whereabouts. He got a letter some decades ago, but since his brothers never stayed in one place, he had no idea where they were. Celeste asked him whether he was worried about his brothers, but he said no because his mom was an elf, and his dad was a dragon, and both were skilled in magic. Both races also lived long lives, so even if he didn't hear from them for decades, there was no need for him to worry. Yuri thought he was half and half since his mom was an elf and his father was a dragon, but Celeste said that it wasn't so because when parents were of two different races, the child was born as one race or the other. For him, he was a dragon, while his two brothers were elves. Yuri asked what Celeste's brothers were like, and he said they were about 170 years old, and compared to humans, they were only a little older than Yuri was. Elf twins were also extremely rare, so when they were born, it was a huge event. His brothers were full of energy to an annoying extent, and when they were young, it was pretty hard for him to deal with them because they would use wind magic to cause chaos in the house, and he would always wake up to find his hair braided into pigtails. In fact, he had now started braiding his hair as a habit thanks to his brothers. After Celeste's much unneeded rant, Yuri fell fast asleep. Watching her sleep, all he wanted was for her to grow healthy and strong. He wondered how long he would keep having such moments because Yuri would grow into a baddie pretty soon, and since her natural partner was still unknown, she may fall in love with someone else someday. He worried because he didn't know how long she would stay with him, so he just wanted to have at least the growing season where they would shop for new clothes whenever she outgrew them, and he prayed she would grow slowly. Meanwhile, Celeste and her daughter were discussing Celeste and Yuri, particularly because he got her a lot of clothes. Celeste said Celeste couldn't resist Yuri's cuteness, but Adelaide responded with a one-worded answer, obviously filled with wrath. She picked up a piece of jewelry that was bought for Celeste, a brooch, and then slipped it into the pocket of her apron. For Adelaide, ever since Celeste announced that he had found his soulmate, it felt like a death sentence. She was obsessed with him. His bright blue hair and golden eyes were the very things that had made her fall hard for him. Although many dragons in human form possessed distinctive beauty, Celeste was the most beautiful of them all. He was also kinder than anyone she had met, and was so very elegant compared to the men of the city, who were nothing but broke men of culture. Knowing that dragons could recognize their soulmates at first sight, Adelaide understood that she wasn't Celeste's soulmate, as he hadn't selected her. She wished that if she wasn't the one, then at least he wouldn't find his soulmate after she died. But even so, somehow, he had found a soulmate in Yuri, and even when Adelaide wore a cute apron, Celeste barely even noticed and was busy obsessing over a frail girl who never even smiled. She was lost in her deep, dark thoughts when Celeste called her to prepare tea after the meal for Yuri. She served Yuri her tea, even if it was only milk that was in it. Yuri could still perceive that cold aura from Adelaide, but she drank her milk regardless because it was delicious. Afterwards, it was time for them to leave, and Celeste, as he was dressing Yuri up, told her there were no lessons that day and they would be attending an interrogation from the guard squad regarding what happened at the sleeve betting arena. He understood that it might be difficult for her to talk about it, but Yuri asked if Daisy would be there beside her. He told her he would be there instead because Daisy would be getting interrogated in a different room, and so things wouldn't be so hard for her. Arriving at the interrogation room, some beastmen came in, and one of them was a woman, just in case Celeste wasn't comfortable talking to a man. He later asked Yuri if she could remember him, and then reminded her that he was the guy from under the arena whom she had kicked. She immediately apologized, but he said he was the one to do so because he had frightened her back then. It was soon time for their interrogation, but for some reason, the slave master who had been bullying Yuri and Daisy happened to be there, and the moment he spotted her, he called out to her, saying she was his soulmate. The beast man said that this dude was supposed to be interrogated in the afternoon, but before he could do anything, the idiot broke free from his chains and rushed to grab Yuri. Before he could touch a hair on her head, Celeste grabbed her into his arms and directed a wall of ice shrapnel at his face, merely inches away from getting rid of him. The idiot was frustrated, saying yet again that Celeste had one-upped him. He recognized him as the Blue Dragon, and the prison warden soon came with pitchforks to keep the fool in check. But surprisingly, he jumped out through the window, and immediately they announced for the guards to surround the area. Turning to Yuri, Celeste asked if she could stand, but she literally was so weak, so he held her in his arms. He realized that a girl like her, who wasn't afraid of Charles or even Will, was terrified to death of this weird slave master of hers. Obviously, this changed something in his eyes. On the other hand, Adelaide was back at home, nagging and annoyed at the fact that she had to wash Yuri's clothes. But when she held Celeste's clothes, she began obsessing over his scent. But just then, the slave master who had escaped prison arrived right in front of her, saying that she bore slave number 8's scent. From his speech, Adelaide knew that the slave number 8 he was referring to was Yuri. Right then, the beastman grabbed Celeste's shirt from her hand, and he sniffed it because that was enough to make him peek. He found out that it belonged to Celeste, who was a blue dragon, and that this certainly was his lair. Adelaide asked him if he wanted Yuri, and in exchange, he should swear to protect her and her mother. The guy was surprised and soon became eager for that, saying as long as he had Yuri, he didn't need any adults because she was worth a lot of money, particularly Yuri. Just then, Celeste returned and shared that Yuri had a little trouble with the guards. She was timid and quiet, so he asked Yuri whether she could eat dinner, but she couldn't, so he told Celeste to leave. He permitted Celeste to leave for the day, and Adelaide appeared behind, saying they should leave and return home. Before they left, Celeste asked her daughter if the back door was properly locked, and Adelaide shut the door and informed her that it was properly shut. But when her mom wasn't looking, she unlocked the door. Celeste had served some tea for Yuri, so Celeste said he would put away his coat and return right away. With Yuri alone in the room, she could hear weird noises and thought it was the maid. She was attracted in the direction of the sound and followed the door that Adelaide had left open and stood in front of the door that Adelaide had left open. At that time, her slave master appeared right behind her. On the other hand, Celeste, as he was taking off his coat, wondered why the beast man wasn't caught. He could understand that since this particular guy was from the cat tribe, he felt he was sleek, and this was all because he had found this information from Will, who had told him to take Yuri and head back. Just then, Celeste heard a sound and instantly turned, only to find that the beast man had held Yuri in his hand and was stifling her mumbles. Now, Yuri was a trump card in his hands, and her tears meant nothing to him. He began laughing as the girl trembled and peed her pants, because previously, no matter how much he hit her before, she stayed expressionless and calm, but now she had started to act her age. Celeste was brimming with anger and rage, so he summoned a magical attack with both hands. But just before he could send it towards the idiot's head, the beastman said he heard that Yuri was Celeste's mate. Celeste wondered what he meant by him hearing it somewhere, but the beastman said he wasn't dumb enough to go head-to-head with a dragon king like Celeste, because for dragons, mates were everything, and everyone knew that. And so he said that Celeste should not open his mouth because chanting was forbidden, and then he ordered him to lower his arms and not move, lest his claws would slice Yuri's belly open. Knowing the stakes were against him, Celeste had to comply, staring at Yuri's eyes, which were filled with fear and terror. Instantly, the beastman covered Celeste's face with his paw, mocking him as he said he never knew dragons would be so weak when it comes to their mates, just as Celeste had demonstrated. He then said that even a dragon like Celeste would die if their head got smashed in, so he would crush Celeste so he could not come chasing after Yuri again. As Yuri watched this, she realized that it was the same thing happening now that had happened back then, as she watched Daisy almost lose her life. But she knew if she defied her master, she was likely to die as well. She tried to mutter Celeste's name as she remembered that it was normal for her to get hit or kicked. And even when Daisy was being beaten beside her, her only response aloud was, "Yes, master." And that was still normal. She couldn't cry, and tears didn't come out, and yet something about watching this beastman handle Celeste in such a manner made her upset. Something was strange about Celeste's eye that terrified the beastman. Yuri knew she had to run, but she was scared that if she resisted, something might happen to Celeste. Meanwhile, the beastman asked Celeste what was up with that look in his eyes, and then he decided to end him. But just before that could happen, Yuri found strength within her and kicked the beastman to the side as she jumped out of his arms. He immediately rushed towards her, but at that moment, Celeste swung in with full-blown anger. In the end, he had his hands wrapped around the beastman's neck, and no matter how the beastman tried to remove Celeste's slender arms, they never came up. Celeste cursed at him and said that, for his audacity to put his soulmate through such a gruesome experience, he would make him suffer in the same manner. He had desperately been holding back until this moment, and right now, Celeste planned to go full-blown. As the beastman's arms were still wrapped around, suddenly they were frozen and shattered into pieces, rendering him unable to defend himself. At the same time, his neck had become frozen solid, and there was nothing he could do to stop Celeste, no matter how he tried. However, before he could complete that, Yuri wrapped her hands around him to stop him, and when he noticed her crying, he turned his attention towards her. Arriving late were Will and a colleague, as they had sensed a powerful magic in that direction. They asked if the beastman was okay, and it turned out he was, but Celeste turned his attention to Yuri. He apologized for nearly end-foring the beastman and asked if his severed arm could be reattached. Will said that if the slave master had hurt someone of Yuri's age, then Celeste's response was only natural. The other guy said treating the slave master would be hard because he was soaked in ice magic, but it could still be done. All the while, Celeste only cared about his beloved and apologized for scaring her while saying he would never let her slave master come near her again. However, Yuri said that the next time something like that happened, she would definitely fight. He hugged her as he remembered that it was she who saved him. But while doing that, she noticed that he had an injury on his arm. However, he simply healed it using his magic and revealed that he was a healer for the security squad. The question that Will was asking alongside a colleague of his was how the beast man knew about Celeste's house, because breaking into a dragon's house was the dumbest idea ever, unless one had a death wish. Celeste, who had been listening to their conversation, noticed something was strange about the back door. He drew closer and sniffed the handle on the door and immediately fell silent because the only face that came to his mind was Adelaide. In the morning, the maids heard about what had happened to Celeste and Yuri, but only Celine cared enough to comfort Yuri with a hug, while the busy Adelaide looked guilty as ever. Celeste left the house in Celine's care and asked that they fix the window, but Adelaide was left terrified and clutching the end of her dress, because the beast man had promised he wouldn't lay a hand on Celeste, so she was angry that he did, and that somehow, that Yuri girl was always getting protected. She almost grabbed the girl, but Celeste pulled out of her grasp and walked out, accepting that she was stronger than Adelaide. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Daisy had a flashback beginning from when the slave master and his gang invaded their village to capture the young ones and women of childbearing age, while slaying the men and old people. That instant, Daisy told her brother to hide while she lifted her axe to attack the slave master, but he caught her unfortunately and said she would make for an excellent combat slave. Her brother cried while Daisy herself tried to fight against that idiot. But the beast man said her aggressiveness would make her popular at the market, while her brother wasn't useful and would only be good enough for exchange and a good toy for his new owner. Knowing the reality, Daisy pleaded to be allowed to stay with her younger brother, and then she would behave well. And much later, they ended up in the slave camp. The slave master told her that she had to fight as her life depended on it, because that was what was going on now. And that was why Daisy kept picking herself up so she could see her younger brother, whom she was separated from. Moments later, the beast man spoke about Daisy going toe-to-toe with Yuri because she was a slave raised in their gambling pit who had been trained since birth and was super strong. And that day, Daisy came out to see that her opponent was just a girl with a tiny frame. Thinking of her brother, she knew if she lost that she might die, but she could also win and still not take the life of number 8. Which was why, after their fight, she checked on the girl. Back then, Daisy asked Yuri whether she could understand her, and since that day they became friends and Daisy decided to be her big sister. Zooming back into her present reality, Daisy was seated in a carriage beside Valentine, and Val asked her if she should stick to calling her Daisy, because she obviously must have had a real name by which she was addressed before being enslaved. Daisy said it was okay to stick to the name because whenever people addressed her by her old name, it reminded her of her family and the village, and so she wanted to stay as Daisy, not to mention that it was the name by which Yuri addressed her. Later that morning, they reunited with each other and were both excited, especially Daisy, who was glad to see that Yuri was safe. Later, Valentine began their day with a math lecture and asked if they had learned any form of math before, and Daisy said she used to count cows in the village. She used apples to establish simple basic math rules, and Yuri was picking them up pretty quickly, and rather surprisingly, Valentine decided to stop asking to count apples and instead asked Yuri to add up to 4 numbers. She instantly gave the answer and they were shocked that she did it all in her head. Obviously, this was due to memories from her past life, but she couldn't tell them this. Excitedly, Daisy hugged her, and Valentine asked her to hold her hand out for a reward. That turned out to be a lucky candy, and she said that if Daisy got the next one right, she would get one as well. Yuri placed the sweet in her pocket, saying she would give it to Celeste because he worked so hard. Thereafter, it was Daisy's turn to do some lessons on subtraction, and even though she took some time counting with her fingers, she got the answer right, while Yuri did so without even trying. Valentine said that since they both understood addition and subtraction, she would give a lesson on multiplication. She used an example with apples and Daisy got the answer right. Yuri was trying to figure it out and remembered that multiplication was like times tables. The old version of herself learned this when her parents were teaching her in the hospital. So it wasn't surprising when she went on to give rapid answers from her head when the teacher asked her to multiply some things using apples. Eventually, she wrote out the entire multiplication table, which they didn't have in their world yet. So Valentine was thrilled because now no one had to calculate any multiplication figure. She also asked Yuri if she could have the paper so she could teach it to the new kids. She said that even many of the older adults couldn't calculate like that, which showed that Yuri was Dr. Stone's twin. All of this was quite surprising to Yuri because in her previous world, she had crammed the entire multiplication table at a much younger age. She asked them if there was no place for them to study, and Valentine said people usually learned when they started working, and only those from noble families might have a tutor, or people would have to learn in an orphanage if they offered. Generally, Valentine wished everyone could at least read, write, and calculate, because lots of families needed every one of their members to work just for survival. Yuri knew that if she had stayed in the village, she probably never would have studied. But thinking about Celeste, who made all of this possible, she felt lucky because now she had a big room, clean clothes, and was literally living the soft life, unlike in her past life, where she cost her parents a lot in medical care and died before she could grow up and repay them by working. Anyway, Valentine checked out her performance in dividing numbers and realized that Yuri was overall a genius at maths and worked better than she did at reading. In fact, she wished they could hire her in the second guard unit's office. And instantly that clicked something in Yuri, so she said she would do office work. Valentine said that would be great, but for office work, Yuri had to get used to both writing and reading. Even though she wasn't there yet, Yuri was glad that she had finally found a job she could do. Later, while Celeste was at his job healing people, he turned to see that lots of people were gathered around Yuri and that she was teaching them stuff. On his behalf, Valentine had to drag the girl out and bring her to Celeste, showing him what Yuri had invented, which was the multiplication table. He was amazed because Yuri had only learnt math that very day but had proven herself to be a super genius. And so, in his pride, Celeste bent and patted her on the head because she had demonstrated her incredible talent. She managed to mutter some words, expressing that she wanted to become an office worker when she was much grown, and this kind of surprised Celeste. She held his hand, saying that because he worked, she also wanted to work so she would be by his side. Hearing this, he was so pleased with her that he pulled her in, hugged her so tight. She still felt so small in her hands and had only been freed recently from slavery. Yet here she was, looking forward to choosing her next step by herself, walking the same path as he did. And so he said that he would definitely be happy to work with her and return home together after work. She thanked him for his hard work and gave him the candy she was given as a reward for studying, and then he smiled, telling her that her kindness was one of her many talents. As Daisy watched them, she remembered how Yuri didn't know any words except yes, about 2 years ago because she was expressionless, having been so battered. She was treated even worse than Daisy, even though she was born in that gambling den and Daisy was taken from the village. It was because of Yuri that Daisy was able to endure and tried her best as her big sister. But now things were different, and they had escaped from that hell of a place, while Yuri discovered something she was good at and found her mate, the only person she would be happy with. Daisy smiled, saying that if Yuri could be happy, then she would be satisfied as well and hopefully encounter something special too. Just then, Valentine also handed Daisy a candy for studying well, and Daisy asked what they would be learning the following day. Valentine said she would teach them general knowledge so one day they could go shopping on their own and learn how to use money. Daisy said she wanted to learn all sorts of things because she was Yuri's sister, and she'd lead the way by studying harder every time because she still hoped to meet her brother one day. Later that day, Celeste and Yuri returned home, and Celeste said her daughter was tidying up the room. When Yuri got into her room, she saw Adelaide fixing up her things, and she was immediately startled when she was caught with Adelaide. Immediately, the maid darted out of the room and banged the door, and then Yuri walked into her closet. While in her closet, Yui has inspected all the boxes and noticed that there was nothing strange in any of them. Later, when she was with Celeste, he said he was really happy about her dream to become a staff member of the guard unit, but he wondered whether she had to work that much. Yuri said she had to because everything about her cost a lot, such as getting her a new room and buying a new carpet. He told her he was grateful for her feelings, but couldn't accept her help because her living expenses were already covered by the government support. Even if she worked, the money she earned was hers to spend however she deemed fit. The room he prepared for her was only done so because he wanted to do those things for her, and the only things Yuri ever chose were her clothes. Speaking of the dress Yuri was wearing, Celeste remembered that her outfit had a matching ribbon, but Yuri realized she couldn't find it, and so they decided to go search for it together. Upon entering her room, Yuri noticed that the bed was all scattered, so she fixed it up. Celeste told her she was doing very well for herself and asked if she always made her bed by herself. When she confirmed it, he patted her on the head, saying it was very responsible of her. However, his expression turned grim because cleaning Yuri's room was Adelaide's job, and even though it was Celeste's house, Yuri's room was her private space, so he had tried not to ever go in except in the mornings, which is why he never noticed her room being a big mess. He also noticed that there was dust on the surfaces and asked for permission to check the wardrobe. While doing that, he noticed a small box tucked away in the top corner and in a hidden place where even Yuri wouldn't even see it. So he told her to wait while he inspected her room for a bit. That was when he opened that box and noticed it was empty, alongside many other jewelry boxes. The moment he sniffed the boxes, he could pick up on Adelaide's scent. The problem was that Adelaide had only been working for Celeste for 2 years, but her family had served his house ever since her great-grandmother. Her mother, Celeste, was someone Celeste had known since he was born and was like family to her. He wondered whether to deal with the issue without telling Yuri, but noticing the expression on her face, he bent closer and told her he believed Adelaide had been stealing her small belongings. Yuri herself said she caught Adelaide trying on her clothes in front of the mirror and noticed that she couldn't find one of her outfits, but felt it was only a mistake. Even though she felt weird, she didn't say anything sooner, and for that she was sorry. Celeste said she wasn't at fault and also apologized that he didn't notice, and they decided to tell Celeste all about it. When Celeste heard this, she was shocked to hear. She was shocked, and even more so when she heard that her daughter wasn't cleaning Yuri's room or performing her duties. The woman confessed that she had seen Adelaide wearing a hair ornament, but she didn't notice that it was stolen because Adelaide claimed to have saved money to buy it. Celeste fell to her knees begging and apologizing on her daughter's behalf, and Celeste told the woman to check Adelaide's belongings without her knowing. The woman promised to do it later that night because, as a mother, she couldn't ignore something as grave as her daughter stealing things. Yuri checked on Celeste, asking the woman if she was okay, and the lady said she was while apologizing for what her daughter did. On the other hand, Celeste sighed because, despite having lived a long life, he still didn't know the right answer in such moments. As Yuri checked on him, his attention shifted to the color of her eyes, which were like black tea, and how beautiful the red coral hairpin would have looked on her. He asked her if she wanted to take back what was stolen from her, and she said she did want it back because it was the first thing ever bought for her. She asked Celeste if it would be okay if Adelaide simply returned the jewelry because she didn't want Celine or her daughter to suffer. For Celeste, this was one of the most moving things ever because, until now, what overflowed in his heart was an instinct that gave him affection for Yuri. But now, after seeing Yuri's honesty, hard work, and sincerity, including her kindness, he wanted to treasure her with all his heart. She told him not to tell everybody to keep it a secret, but he said they would have to settle the matter properly. Meanwhile, Celine went back home and rummaged through Adelaide's things, searching for the possible jewelry of Yuri that was stolen. She hadn't found anything and thought it was all a mistake until she encountered a secret drawer where she found literally all of Yuri's things neatly folded. All the while, Adelaide was asleep. The next day, Celeste called Adelaide for a meeting, and she was surprised, wondering what it could all be about. Together with her mom, she sat before Yuri and Celeste asked her if she had something to say. She played dumb, saying nothing, and even after a moment of silence, she still said nothing. So Celeste spoke up, saying he had expected her to confess herself, but since she didn't want to, it couldn't be helped. Thereafter, he accused her of stealing from Yuri, but she vehemently denied it, saying she would never do such a thing. Her mom called her to order, and she sat back, so Celeste asked her calmly to explain why she did so. Seeing she was unwilling to explain why, he told her that it was okay for her to keep her reasons to herself, but be aware that there were consequences to her actions, such as her having to quit her job. Her mom rebuked her, forcing her to understand the gravity of her crime or theft. Slowly, she began to confess her true feelings and eventually got overtaken by rage, saying she couldn't understand why Celeste had chosen a plotless doll over her, whose body was a weapon. She also wondered why Yuri got to wear all the pretty dresses, whereas Adele herself wanted to wear them, and had always dreamed of Celeste gifting her cute clothes and hair ornaments while she stood beside him. And now he was doing all of that for Yuri simply because she was his mate. Yuri thought to herself, saying she didn't understand anything either. Celeste was kind, a handsome man, a little overprotective, sweet to her, strong with magic, and a long-lived dragon king. So she wondered why someone like her was Celeste's mate. However, Celeste told Adelaide that he could not reciprocate her feelings because he had already found someone who was more important to him than anyone else. He also had no intention of forgiving anyone who harbored malice towards his precious girl. But Adelaide said he was only speaking based on his dragon instinct, and his heart was probably not with Yuri because he cherished her as a mate, not because he was in love with her. She also said that he was rational, and so he could probably take someone other than his mate as a lover. But Celeste stood up when she had heard enough of her daughter's madness and slapped the whack out of her. She reminded Adelaide that Lord Celeste had done so much for them, and since Adelaide was born, he raised their wages whenever they needed it, and they were only able to buy their house because Celeste became their guarantor. She also spoke about Yuri, who had never for once blamed Adelaide for anything, but instead worried about Celeste. Yet here Adelaide was blaming Yuri for her own misdeeds. She instantly ordered her daughter to apologize to Celeste and Yuri, but the idiotic girl said that she wouldn't because a slave's child should just dress like a slave. Besides, the hair ornament looked better on Adelaide than on Yuri, who was just a frail girl, and even the boys praised her, saying she was cute. Celeste grabbed her daughter and questioned her audacity to say such profane words in front of Celeste, and it was obvious that the guy was already upset because soon enough, the whole room felt cold, even as Yuri tried to hold Celeste down. At that point, Celeste was overtaken by fury and was only one action away from dealing with Adelaide. Yuri could already tell that he was angry because this wasn't his first time getting upset. Back then, when she was attacked by the slave master, Celeste became uncontrollable and had a flame-like surge of murderous intent. Yuri herself had experienced this feeling when Daisy was used as a shield, and she was consumed by anger, but right now, Celeste's anger was a quiet anger, not coming from instinct but directly from the heart. Even she, who was used to the murder intent, could feel it crackling. Coldly, Celeste said that if Adelaide had admitted her crime and shown remorse, perhaps he would have been merciful, but it seemed she had no intention of doing so. He then told her mother, Celeste, to hand Adelaide over to the guard corps. Adelaide couldn't believe it and thought her mother would take her side. So she started, but when she saw that her mom instantly said she would do so, Adelaide began to confess that she had only borrowed Yuri's jewelry for a bit and would immediately return it. However, Celeste told her that her crime was not only theft, but also the fact that she had let the beastman slave her into the house. This one shocked both her mom and Yuri, as well as Adelaide herself, and Celeste said that the beastman had confessed to the crime. Adelaide fell on her knees, saying she had only wanted Yuri to go away and didn't intend for things to be so horrible and violent, and that he should believe her. However, Celeste smiled slightly, saying he did believe her, but that even if it was such a small feeling to her, it meant his own precious girl was being hurt by someone he trusted. Back then, he had picked up on Adelaide's scent on the doorknob but still wanted to believe in her. In the same way, Celeste, her mother, must have wished until the very last moment that the one daughter she loved would never steal, but it only meant that Adelaide had betrayed both her and her mother. Celeste bowed instantly, pleading that she had no words of apology and would have to serve the punishment with her daughter as well. But Celeste said that with Adelaide gone, he would leave Celeste's care to her mother. Adelaide broke down crying, saying she didn't want any of that. But Celeste had already put on his uniform and said he would take her into custody as a thief. He told her to stand up, and that was that. Much later, he reunited with Will and let him know that he had arrested Adelaide. Will asked him if he was okay with that because, given that Adelaide was the daughter of someone who served him for years, but Celeste said it couldn't be helped. Anyway, Will said that since it was her first offense, the theft alone wouldn't be treated as a grave crime, but instead, the aiding or abetting of kidnapping would be judged. He asked about Yuri, and Celeste said that Yuri was concerned and worried about Celeste being downhearted. Apparently, Yuri said that if Adelaide's crime had caused Celeste and Celeste any form of suffering, her deeds should have stayed secret. Will asked him why he didn't go along with what Yuri suggested, and Celeste said that he wondered what Yuri would think if he had overlooked Adelaide's offense. Obviously, the next time something happened, she would feel there was no point in telling him anything, and she would stop trusting or relying on him. Anyway, Will laughed, saying being loved by his servant girl had to be quite troublesome because, from a human's perspective, the dragonkin always seemed attractive, especially someone like Celeste who was always smiling and causing them to misunderstand his feelings. With this knowledge, Celeste pondered and decided he would be careful from that day forward in how he portrayed himself to anyone. Will Yuri ever grow to return Celeste's affection one day? Comment Adelaide gets me laid for the second part of the series. Kindly give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching and subscribe to the channel for similar content. As always, thanks for watching.